Here are the official rankings for the fantasy playoffs. Starting off with the S tier, I'm putting Gibbs at 1. I'm sorry, but this dude is taking it to a completely different level. The usage is absolutely through the roof. David Montgomery getting scaled back. The only holdup that I have with Gibbs in comparison to McCaffrey is he has to play the Rams in week 15, and he has to play the Minnesota Vikings in your fantasy football championship in week 17. But if you look at the last 5 games that he has played, he has scored 38 points, 55 points, and 37 points in a game. It's absurd what you are getting from Gibbs right now. I wish that I had him as the running back 1 on my team. I would be fine if McCaffrey was the running back 1 on my team. Don't get me wrong. McCaffrey gives you a much higher floor than what Gibbs has seen so far this year. Obviously, you're not getting the same level ceiling, mainly due to the floor coming from the reception volume. 8.2 receptions per game. If you're looking at the matchups are actually better for McCaffrey than they are for Gibbs, where he gets to play against Tennessee, Indianapolis, and then Chicago. Now, moving down to our A-tier running backs, I'm going to put Devon Achane here for the time being. Achane may fall down these rankings. I'm going to continue to update them every day for y'all if the injury appears to be something we need to worry about. But this coaching staff already came out and they said, you know what? Achane could have gone back into the game, but we played against the New York Jets and we were up by 50. So, of course, they weren't going to risk throwing Achane back out there, and operating under the assumption that Devon Achane is good to go this next week. He has given you the highest floor in fantasy football, where even in a game in which he only has 8 touches because he gets injured, he still scores 17.5 points. He gets to play the Cincinnati Bengals in week 16 as well. And then, of course, Jonathan Taylor is going to be the big faller that we have. With Jonathan Taylor, he has been much worse since coming out of the bye. 8.6, 15.1, and now 11.4 fantasy points. And the main concern that we are going to have is Daniel Jones leaving this offense, a no-name quarterback taking over as the starter, leading to an overall collapse with the projected output from Indy, including trips to the red zone going into the future. Looking at the matchups, you have to play Seattle this next week as well. So I'm going to be moving Jonathan Taylor down, as you can tell, but he is still a top 5 running back. You're still jamming him every single week. He's still averaging 23.8 fantasy points per game this season. Now, Bijan Robinson will be our next name. If you're looking at Bijan, the next 3 weeks, you have a good matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, but you do have to play against the Rams in the fantasy football championship. Obviously, this past week was a little bit disappointing against the Seattle Seahawks in a very tough matchup. But I'm not super concerned with Bijan, still averaging 20 fantasy points per game. Now, dropping down to our next tier, James Cook is averaging 100 rushing yards per game still. The receiving involvement isn't to the same level of some of these other running backs. The touchdown's very likely to be there for James Cook most weeks. This past week, of course, he ended up actually losing that touchdown because he did fumble. But still, you have a very high floor with what you're getting carries-wise. He hasn't had a game this season with fewer than 13 carries. The matchups over the next 3 weeks are very tough for James Cook, though. And honestly, for that reason, I'm going to move James Cook down these rankings a bit, because you are going to have to play against the New England Patriots this week. Obviously not ideal, especially with that game being in New England. Then you have to play against Cleveland in week 16 and Philly in week 17. I don't have James Cook on my own team, but I do have Josh Allen. And honestly, I'm a little bit concerned with these matchups. Now, Josh Jacobs is on my team. And with Jacobs, he looked very good in that Chicago game. Honestly, I'm surprised that he only scored 17 points. I figured that he would have had more just watching the game. And this week, he is going to have a very tough matchup against the Denver Broncos. Thank God I earned myself a round 1 bye, so we don't have to worry about those week 15 matchups. But if you had Jacobs and you had to play in week 15, obviously that would be something to be concerned with. But he has ramped back up to seeing the usage that he saw earlier in the year, which obviously is a massive plus. Bucky Irving hasn't ramped up to see the exact same usage that he had previously, though. Obviously, he had a decent amount of Rachaad White usage this past week. They played the same amount of snaps. But if you're looking at the matchups for Bucky Irving, they're actually much better than what you have with somebody like James Cook, where Bucky gets to play against the Miami Dolphins in week 17. He gets the Atlanta Falcons in week 15 and the Carolina Panthers in week 16. Now, moving down to our next tier, Javonte Williams is a great running back when it comes to volume. Like, this is a player that's averaging 3.8 targets per game and 17.9 carries per game. So he's sitting here with like 22 opportunities a game. Now, the efficiency as a receiver, garbage. As a rusher, pretty damn good. This offense is one that puts up a lot of points. This week's matchup is going to be very tough against Minnesota Vikings, but then you get Washington in week 17. Derrick Henry, still, set it and forget it, must start running back every week. I honestly kind of hope that he face plants, because y'all know I really did not draft Derrick Henry at all in Underdog best ball drafts this year. Now, the thing with Derrick Henry, though, is you get a really good matchup in week 15 against the Cincinnati Bengals, but then tough matchups against the New England Patriots and the Green Bay Packers in weeks 16 and 17. Chase Brown is seeing his usage take a dip now that Samaje Perine's back in Cincinnati. But honestly, with Joe Burrow under center and this offense being better in general, it may not matter that Samaje Perine is all of a sudden on the field taking some of those third down snaps, because this past week, you just saw Chase Brown go out there and score multiple touchdowns and still give you 18.5 points. And you have favorable matchups over the coming weeks where you get to play against Baltimore, Miami, and the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Saquon Barkley is a running back that I have on my team. He's my running back 2 behind Josh Jacobs. So I am very much looking forward to what we get in the game tonight. Honestly, my matchup doesn't exactly matter, but the main reason why I'm looking forward to the game tonight, just to see what Barkley does, is I want to know our long-term expectations. The matchup week 16 against Washington, week 17 against Buffalo, I'm not really too concerned with these. Obviously, week 15, great matchup against the Raiders. Sadly, again, I have that bye week, so I can't take advantage of that matchup. Right now, Saquon Barkley is higher, lower 91.5 rushing yards, higher, lower 13.75 fantasy points on Underdog Fantasy. And he's only hit higher than 13.75 points one time since week 5. So I'm pretty sure the sharp money is going to be on the lower. But obviously, if you want to check out any of those projections on Underdog Fantasy, you can find that link in the description, in the comment section. Code FLOCK will get $100 added to your account after you play your first 5. You'll get a gimme pick, higher, lower, half a total yard for a player. Underdog Fantasy is available in almost every single state. That link's in the description and comment section. Then Kyron Williams will be our next player. With Kyron, the Blake Corum usage is concerning. Don't get me wrong, but he's just been so damn good that it hasn't mattered. Like, Kyron Williams, since the bye week, weeks 9 through 14, has averaged a touchdown a game. The interesting thing is Blake Corum's not getting involved as a receiver whatsoever, but neither is Kyron Williams. Like, Kyron Williams was actually involved as a receiver heavily at the beginning of the season, but that has been phased out as of late. Now, Amari and Hampton could change in these rankings a bunch. I'm going to be live streaming after the game on Monday, of course, to update these rankings for y'all, and they'll be updated on flockfantasy.com. I'll say matchup wise, Amari and Hampton's going to be in a really tough spot against the Kansas City Chiefs week 15, against the Houston Texans week 17, but he gets the great matchup against the Dallas Cowboys in week 16. Then Travis Etienne trending in the right direction with Byshell Tootin getting pulled this past week, but Etienne not really getting involved as a receiver. That job is LaQuint Allen's. Tough matchup against Denver in week 16 as well, but Etienne, 5 of the last 6 games he's played, has looked incredible. Ashton Jeanty in one of the worst offenses in the league. Again, the receiving involvement has been incredible, where over the past 6 games, he's had at least 4 targets in every contest. Over the past 6 games, he's had at least 10 carries in 5 of them. So the volume's very good. I still want to believe that Ashton Jeanty's a good player, but the offense is horrendous. Going over and looking at RJ Harvey, I would want to move RJ Harvey higher than this. Back-to-back games with 20 fantasy points. And this past week, he actually expanded his role quite dramatically. The only holdup that I'm going to have for having RJ Harvey higher in these rankings will be asked to play the Green Bay Packers in week 15, as well as the Kansas City Chiefs in week 17. Trevion Henderson, we didn't get to see this past week, but obviously back in week 13, it was frustrating seeing Ramondre Stevenson on the field. Trevion Henderson had only played 48% of the snaps in that game. Looking at the matchups for the fantasy playoffs, I'm not really worried about Buffalo, Baltimore, or the New York Jets. I just think the main concern is going to be workload, but I believe in the offense and I believe in Henderson, the talent. Breece Hall, I'm going to be starting myself. He gets the New Orleans Saints week 16, which it's a big matchup for me. And then he gets the New England Patriots week 17, which I'd be very worried about. But I still think that Breece Hall is going to be a running back that just frankly you have to start because he is seeing 70+% of the snaps every single week in his offense. It's just that the offense is garbage. Quinshon Judkins and the Browns offense actually looked better this past week, but that was with them just allowing Shedeur Sanders to drop back pretty much every single snap. And honestly, they didn't lean on the run nearly as much with Judkins. And the next 3 weeks, they play at Chicago. They're going to be heavy dogs. They play at home against Buffalo. They'll be heavy dogs. And then they play at home against Pittsburgh. I mean, they play week 18 in Cincinnati, which obviously that would be a great matchup if your fantasy championship was in week 18 for whatever reason. But I want to be on the record real quick. How I'm making these rankings and how I'm making these videos from here on out is operating under the assumption that your playoffs are weeks 15, 16, and 17, and week 18 is meaningless. If your commissioner set it up where y'all are playing in week 18, to fire your commissioner, get a new one. Like, I'm not even going to be making videos or live streaming in week 18. I'll be completely honest with you. Now, tier D and above, all those players are must start every single week for most formats. Tier E and below, I hope you don't have to start him. Jaylen Warren is startable. If he has a decent floor, every single week he's going to get double-digit opportunities. But Kenneth Gainwell just played the same amount of snaps. And again, my favorite stat is Jaylen Warren has not scored 20 fantasy points all year. Rico Dowdle was a must-start running back earlier in the season, where his first 5 games starting for the Carolina Panthers, he had scored 32, 34, 28, 15, and 15 fantasy points. But over the past 2 weeks, the Chuba Hubbard usage has increased quite dramatically. So it's much, much tougher for me to come through and tell you, yeah, you should be excited about Rico Dowdle. I still would assume that he is the starter here, but I mean, one more week of Chuba playing ahead of him. We're going to flip this. Then DeAndre Swift, Kyle Monangai will be our next 2 backs. DeAndre Swift's the guy I would prefer, even if Monangai is expanding his role and Swift is shrinking, because DeAndre Swift is going to be the receiving back. Kyle Monangai is not really going to have anything as a receiver. But my big concern is the Chicago backfield is kind of turning into what you have with the Seattle backfield. We're going over to Seattle and Kenneth Walker with Charbonnet. Neither of these players are startable. The only hope that you have is one of them goes down and the other one turns into a league winner. And then with Chicago, I want to circle back and point out that you do have some really, really tough matchups over the next 2 weeks. And then with Woody Marks, he continues to get the volume over and over and over again. He finally, this past week, did something. He scored a touchdown, so he scored 15 fantasy points. But here's the thing. He had 29 opportunities and scored 15 fantasy points. The week prior, he had 20 opportunities and scored 7. The week before that, he had 17 opportunities and scored 8. Woody Marks does the least with the most. Now, I honestly am probably going to move him up these rankings a bit. I think he should be higher in this tier because the volume is safe with Woody Marks the way that it isn't with some of these other backs. And he has very good matchups over the next 2 weeks. Now, our F tier is going to be led off with Aaron Jones. I got this completely wrong last week. I thought Aaron Jones was nuked with the shoulder injury based off his reaction on the sideline. I thought, well, there goes Aaron Jones this season. And then just 4 days later, he's off the injury report. But Aaron Jones has not scored a game with 10 plus fantasy points in the past 3 weeks. I will say this next week, he gets a great matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Then David Montgomery will be our next option. If you are going to look at Montgomery, it's going to be very difficult imagining starting him against the Rams this next week or the Vikings week 17. So really, I would only ever start him if you were to get that injury to Gibbs, but that window of a Gibbs injury is shrinking. Zach Charbonnet, I'd only ever start him if Kenneth Walker goes down, but that window is shrinking. Devin Neal is the starting running back for the New Orleans Saints right now. He's getting a tremendous amount of volume. The next 3 weeks, he has very good matchups, but my hesitation is I don't even know if Kamara is going to miss this next week, so this will be a ranking that we need to make sure we continue to update. I'm going over and looking at Kareem Hunt. Technically, he is like the starting running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, but at the same time, it's by no means a guarantee that he has any ceiling whatsoever. He has 1 game this year with 20 fantasy points, and he scored legitimately 20.0. Looking at the matchups the next 3 weeks, you have at least one good matchup against the Tennessee Titans in week 16. Chuba Hubbard, I would assume, is not the starting running back here in Carolina, even though he played 62% of the snaps and saw 19 opportunities against the Rams back in week 13. I will say, kind of regardless, the Carolina backs have a really tough matchup week 17 against Seattle. Tyrone Tracy, I want to rank here. He has a good matchup against the Commanders week 15, good matchup against the Raiders in week 17. My holdup with Tracy is I just don't know if he's going to be healthy. Kenneth Gainwell split in the backfield with Jalen Warren, but definitely still playing second fiddle. I have Gainwell on my bench. If I was super, super desperate, I could look to get him in. But primarily, I'm more so just going to be banking on if Warren goes down in like week 15, I know Gainwell wins me week 16. Blake Corum, phenomenal week this past week. He's now had back-to-back games setting a career high in fantasy points with 14 and 26. It's been off of rushing touchdowns. Blake Corum still, so far in his NFL career, has had a total of 13 receptions. This season, he's had 13 receiving yards. So, nothing as a receiver. Kyron Williams still has a large enough role where if you were to ever start Blake Corum, you must have nuts of steel. Now, Devin Singletary maybe, just maybe, is viable this next week if Tyrone Tracy's injured. But again, you had positive word with Tyrone Tracy on the bye week this past week. Going to be very important to monitor the injury reports. Kamani Vidal this next week does project to split the backfield with Amari Hampton close to 50-50. Now, with that being said, with Kamani Vidal, it is extremely difficult to see any type of upside here, knowing that Amari Hampton has all the draft capital in the world. Amari Hampton's the more talented back. So Vidal's going to be second fiddle in the coming weeks, and you have tough matchups. But maybe he's the guy this week, but it won't be that way for the playoffs. Alvin Kamara is injured, and even when he was healthy, he was averaging 9.2 fantasy points per game. So I don't know why you could ever look at him. Tyler Algier, premium handcuff. Emmanuel Wilson, premium handcuff. And I'll throw Trey Benson here. I'm really hoping Trey Benson comes back this week for maybe a random touchdown for a best ball team that I have with Trey Benson. Y'all know I faded James Conner and went heavy in on Trey Benson this season. But I don't know. The report that we got this past week does make it seem like Trey Benson may not be coming back this season whatsoever. But I am very much hoping that you made the fantasy playoffs. Again, I want to remind y'all, if you made the playoffs, it is thanks to me, and you're welcome for that. Now, if you did not make the playoffs, it's because of you, and you need to do a better job managing your team. But much love. I really appreciate it, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll see you out in the live stream later tonight.